Black boy is humiliated by police officers, but they didn't know his aunt was from the FBI. Get ready for a wild ride as we dive into this intense story. A young black teen gets humiliated by the police, but little do they know, his aunt is an FBI agent. Things are about to get real complicated real fast. Stick around to find out how everything spirals out of control and what happens when the tables turn. In the heart of a bustling city, 16-year-old Jamal Thompson was just trying to get home after basketball practice. Like any teenager, he had dreams, ambitions, and a tight-knit family that had his back. But on this particular evening, fate had something else in store for him. As Jamal walked down the street, he noticed a police car slowly trailing him, its lights flashing ominously in the fading daylight. Nervously, he quickened his pace, his mind racing through the lessons his family had drilled into him. Always be respectful, keep your hands visible, and don't make any sudden movements. But even with all his caution, the encounter that followed was more humiliating than he could have ever imagined. Two officers stepped out, their faces stern and expressions unreadable. Without warning, they demanded that he drop his bag and get down on the ground. Confused and scared, Jamal complied, trying to explain that he had just come from basketball practice. But the officers weren't interested in explanations. They searched him, barking orders, treating him like a criminal without cause. What the officers didn't know was that Jamal's aunt, Agent Danielle Thompson, was an FBI agent, one of the best in the field. And when she heard what had happened to her nephew, she was ready to use every resource at her disposal to hold those officers accountable. Jamal's background. Jamal Thompson is a 16-year-old black teenager, known for being a good student and an excellent basketball player. He lives in a predominantly black neighborhood but attends a well-regarded school in a more diverse part of the city, often traveling between these two worlds. His family, including his aunt, FBI agent Danielle Thompson, has always stressed the importance of staying out of trouble and being mindful of how society perceives young black men. The neighborhood's history with the police. Jamal's neighborhood has a strained relationship with the police due to a long history of racial profiling, stop-and-frisk incidents, and harsh policing tactics. Tensions have been simmering for years, with several high-profile incidents of police mistreating local black youths. The community views the police as more of a threat than a protector. This distrust has fostered fear, resentment, and a sense of helplessness among residents, especially the younger generation. The suspicious phone call. On the night of the incident, a local resident, unfamiliar with the teenagers in the area, calls the police to report what they believe is suspicious behavior after spotting Jamal and a group of his friends walking through a wealthier part of town. They were simply walking home from basketball practice, laughing and talking as teenagers do, but their presence raises alarm due to ingrained biases. The 911 call doesn't describe any crime or illegal activity, but the dispatcher still sends out officers, noting the presence of multiple black males in the area. The police response? The police respond quickly. Their bias is triggered by the description of a group of black boys in a well-to-do neighborhood. When they arrive, Jamal has already split from his friends and is walking home alone. The officers notice Jamal and immediately begin profiling him, assuming that he must be involved in some form of criminal activity. Their mindset is not to ask questions, but to confront. The encounter. The officers pull up next to Jamal and begin following him, causing him to feel nervous. Even though Jamal knows he hasn't done anything wrong, the neighborhood's history with the police weighs on his mind, and his heart races with fear. They quickly escalate the situation, ordering Jamal to stop and submit to a search. Jamal, terrified and unsure of what he did wrong, complies, trying to explain that he's just heading home from practice. The police dismiss his explanations, deciding instead to humiliate and demean him, using excessive force to frisk him and treating him like a criminal. Impact on the community. The incident spreads quickly throughout the neighborhood. Many residents, already on edge due to previous encounters, rally around Jamal, seeing his humiliation as part of a broader pattern of racial injustice. Conversations about racial profiling, Systemic racism and over-policing resurface, with the community demanding answers and accountability. Protests and rallies are organized, with many calling for police reform and an end to the targeting of black youths. The incident not only traumatizes Jamal, but further alienates the community from the police, deepening the divide between law enforcement and the people they are meant to serve. Jamal's backstory. Jamal Thompson grew up in a close-knit, hard-working family, proud of their roots and their resilience. Raised by his single mother, Tanya, and supported by his extended family, Jamal's upbringing was filled with love, discipline, and a strong sense of justice. His mother, a nurse who often worked long shifts to make ends meet, instilled in him the importance of education, respect, and self-reliance. Jamal's father had been absent for most of his life, but his family made sure he never lacked guidance or protection. Despite growing up in a neighborhood burdened by poverty and crime, Jamal stood out for his ambition and determination. He excelled in school, particularly in math and science, and his talent in basketball earned him recognition both in his community and at school. He had dreams of playing college ball and even considered a career in engineering. His mother and aunt, Danielle Thompson, were his biggest supporters, always pushing him to rise above his circumstances. The role of Aunt Danielle. Danielle Thompson, Jamal's aunt, had always been a figure of strength and inspiration in his life. As one of the few black women in the FBI, she had climbed the ranks through sheer grit and intelligence, overcoming barriers of sexism and racism in law enforcement. Her career had given her a sharp insight into the world of justice and systemic inequality, which only fueled her determination to succeed. Danielle was often Jamal's confidant, a figure who balanced her tough love with deep compassion. She knew firsthand how the world would view Jamal, not as the brilliant, driven young man he was, but as a threat because of the color of his skin. She had long talks with him about how to handle encounters with police, teaching him how to stay calm and respectful to avoid trouble. But she also reminded him never to let the system define his worth. Despite her prestigious position, Danielle was acutely aware of how her own people were treated by the very institutions she worked within. This duality weighed heavily on her, working for the system but knowing it was broken, especially for black men like Jamal. The police encounter. The night Jamal was stopped and humiliated by the police was not the first time the family had encountered prejudice. However, this incident shook them to the core. When Danielle received a frantic call from Jamal's mother about what had happened, she was enraged, but knew she had to remain composed. Danielle quickly became involved in the aftermath of the incident. As an FBI agent, she knew the intricacies of law enforcement procedures, and she began gathering information on the officers involved, planning to launch a formal investigation. However, her connection to the FBI posed its own challenges. Danielle had to navigate the fine line between protecting her nephew and risking her career by confronting her colleagues in law enforcement. She knew the system's bias, having fought against it her entire career, but now the stakes were personal. The family's struggles and challenges. Emotional toll on Jamal. The humiliation by the police deeply affects Jamal. He begins to withdraw from his friends, skips basketball practice, and loses his focus in school. Despite his aunt's reassurances, he feels betrayed by a society that views him as a criminal rather than a promising student and athlete. His sense of safety is shattered and he grapples with anger and fear. Tensions between Danielle's FBI role and community. Danielle faces internal conflict between her professional duty and her personal commitment to protect her family. She begins to question how she can continue working for a system that targets her nephew and people like him. Furthermore, as word spreads through the neighborhood about Jamal's ordeal, many of Danielle's neighbors begin to view her differently. Some see her as part of the very system that oppressed Jamal, while others look to her for justice, expecting her to use her position to hold the police accountable. Legal and social consequences. As Danielle digs deeper into the case, She discovers that the officers involved have a history of racial profiling and misconduct complaints. She faces an uphill battle trying to expose this within law enforcement, knowing that many officers will close ranks to protect their own. Meanwhile, the community demands justice for Jamal, organizing protests and calling for the officers to be fired. This pressure creates tension between the police department and the community, with Danielle caught in the middle. She must balance being a voice for her nephew's justice while navigating the risks of alienating herself from the FBI. Family dynamics and support. Throughout the ordeal, Jamal's mother, Tanya, struggles with the emotional toll on her son. She feels guilty for not being able to protect him and angry at the world for how it views black boys like her son. She leans heavily on Danielle, who not only provides legal support but also emotional strength, guiding the family through the process of filing complaints and navigating the legal system. A path forward. While Danielle fights for justice within the FBI, she also empowers Jamal to reclaim his voice. She encourages him to speak out about the incident, helping him find strength in his story rather than being a victim of it. Together, they begin to turn the tide on the narrative, with Danielle using her influence to push for change within the system, and Jamal finding his own way to heal and rise above the trauma. This journey is not just about the injustice Jamal faced, it's about a family confronting the deep-rooted issues of racial bias, police brutality, and systemic inequality, while also finding a way to move forward together, stronger than before. The pivotal moment. Aunt Danielle's intervention. The night was cool and quiet, with the streetlights casting long shadows over the cracked sidewalks. Jamal, lying face down on the cold concrete, could feel every humiliating second stretch into eternity. The officers barked orders at him, their voices sharp and accusatory, treating him like a hardened criminal. His heart pounded in his chest, fear mixing with a deep sense of shame. He'd done everything they asked, hands visible, words polite, body still. And yet, here he was, publicly humiliated and powerless. Just when the situation seemed like it couldn't get worse, a black SUV pulled up nearby. Jamal couldn't see who it was, but he recognized the voice the moment the door slammed shut. "Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Agent Danielle Thompson strode towards the scene, her voice cutting through the night like a blade. She was dressed in civilian clothes, but the authority in her tone was unmistakable. Her FBI badge gleamed from her waist, catching the attention of both officers. "Ma'am, step back. We're conducting an investigation here," one officer said, trying to maintain control of the situation. But there was a crack in his voice. He hadn't expected someone like her to appear out of nowhere. Danielle's eyes flashed with anger, her entire body vibrating with tension. "I am an FBI agent, and you are harassing my nephew without cause. So I suggest you explain yourselves real quick before this turns into something way bigger than what you signed up for." Jamal, still on the ground, looked up at his aunt in disbelief. He hadn't even realized she was on her way, and for a moment he felt a glimmer of hope amidst the fear. But the tension in the air was thick. One wrong move, and things could escalate fast. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. "We received a report of suspicious activity," the first officer said, trying to sound confident but faltering under Danielle's fiery gaze. "A report? About what? A black teenager walking home? Did you stop anyone else? Or just him because he looked suspicious to you?" Danielle's words were sharp, each one a direct challenge. She stepped closer, her voice low and dangerous now. "You better think real hard about how you want to handle this." The second officer, clearly realizing they were in over their heads, stepped back. "We were just following protocol, ma'am." "Protocol?" Danielle snapped, her voice rising again. "Your protocol involves forcing a child onto the ground, searching him like he's a criminal and refusing to listen to him. This is racial profiling, plain and simple. You know it, I know it. And if you don't release him right now, every single one of your names will be in a report on my desk tomorrow." The officers shifted uneasily. The situation was no longer in their control, and they could feel the weight of their actions pressing down on them. Jamal was still on the ground, unsure if he should move, unsure of what would happen next. "Stand up, Jamal," Danielle said, her voice softening as she looked down at him. "You're coming with me." Slowly, Jamal rose to his feet, his body trembling, not just from fear but from the intensity of the moment. The officers didn't stop him. They couldn't. Danielle's presence had overpowered them, forcing them to realize they had made a grave mistake. One of the officers, still trying to salvage the situation, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we didn't mean any disrespect, we were just..." "Just what?" Danielle shot back. "Doing your job? Your job isn't to terrorize innocent kids. It's to protect this community, but you failed at that tonight. And now, you're going to have to answer for it." The tension hung in the air, thick and heavy. The officers, now realizing the full weight of their actions, stepped back. One muttered an apology under his breath, but Danielle was already walking away, Jamal by her side. As they reached her car, Jamal finally spoke, his voice shaky. "Aunt Danielle, thank you. I didn't know if..." She turned to him, her face softening for the first time that night. "You don't have to thank me, Jamal. I'm just sorry you had to go through this, but you're not alone. Not now, not ever." They drove off into the night, leaving behind the officers who had now realized just how deeply they had messed up. But for Jamal, the scars of that night would linger, and for Danielle the battle was just beginning, because she wasn't going to let this go unanswered. The system had tried to break her nephew, but she wasn't going to let it, not on her watch. Resolution and reflection. After Danielle Thompson's intervention, the police quickly released Jamal without further incident. Realizing they had humiliated an innocent teenager and overstepped their authority, the officers attempted to downplay their actions, but Danielle didn't let it go. She filed an official complaint with the police department, backed by her FBI status and knowledge of the law. An internal investigation into the officers' actions was launched, leading to disciplinary action for the officers involved, and sparking conversations within the department about racial profiling. For Jamal, the road to healing was long. The experience left him shaken, his sense of safety and trust in the system severely damaged. However, with the unwavering support of his aunt and family, Jamal found his voice. He began speaking out about his experience, joining community forums on police reform, and using his story to advocate for change. Danielle's fierce protection and determination to hold the system accountable gave him the strength to move forward, knowing that he wasn't alone. Broader implications for police-community relations. The incident highlighted the ongoing tension between police and Black communities, particularly the issue of racial profiling. Jamal's experience was not unique. It was a reflection of the systemic inequalities that Black communities face daily. The neighborhood rallied around Jamal, using his case as a symbol of the broader injustices they had long endured. Protests, community meetings, and calls for reform grew louder, demanding that the police not only acknowledge their mistakes but take concrete steps to rebuild trust. The importance of support. Danielle's intervention was a reminder of the power of support in moments of injustice. As a family, Jamal and his relatives stood together, refusing to let the system crush him. Danielle's position in law enforcement gave her the tools to challenge the police. But more importantly, her love and unwavering commitment to Jamal provided him with the emotional strength he needed. Their story underscores the importance of community and family support in the fight for justice, and how standing together can turn the tide in battles against systemic oppression. Ultimately, the incident served as a wake-up call for both the police and the community, showing that accountability and reform are not just necessary but urgent. It revealed that real change begins with those who refuse to remain silent, and it is sustained by the strength of families and communities who support each other in the face of injustice. Thanks for watching. What do you think about Jamal's experience and how his aunt stepped in? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop them in the comments below. Let's keep the conversation going about how we can push for change and support each other in times of injustice. And if you enjoyed this story, make sure to check out my other videos for more thought-provoking content on real-life challenges and the power of resilience. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss out on future stories. Stay curious, and I'll see you in the next one.